The automatic doors of Crimson Auto Plaza whooshed open with a crisp, mechanical sigh. It was a bright Saturday morning, but I didn't feel particularly bright. I had just clocked out from an overnight shift at the hospital. 12 hours of barely contained chaos, saving lives, dodging verbal abuse from patients, and watching another young nurse break down in the supply closet. Still, I was here, sleep-deprived, wearing gray scrubs, my hair in a lazy ponytail, and sneakers that had seen better days. My 2007 Honda Civic coughed its last breath 3 nights ago on a rain-slick overpass. I had no choice. I needed a new ride. I stepped inside, blinking at the blinding showroom lights reflecting off polished cars, chrome monsters gleaming like trophies. Salesmen in designer suits buzzed around like bees with Bluetooth headsets, swarming customers who walked in with flashy watches and big wallets. Me? I got one look from the receptionist, a woman in a red blazer with a jaw sharp enough to cut glass, and not even a greeting. "Hi," I said anyway, trying to smile. Her eyes flicked down to my Crocs and badge clip. Her lips pressed into a line. "You here for a service appointment?" "No, I'm looking to buy," I replied, lifting my chin. She blinked, surprised. "Oh, okay. Someone will be with you shortly." She didn't make a move to alert anyone. Instead, she glanced back at her computer, like she was trying to will herself invisible. I stood there awkwardly in the middle of the showroom, hands in my jacket pockets. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I looked at a few vehicles, mostly SUVs, and hovered near a cherry-red Lexus RX 350, admiring the curves, the luxury interior, the confidence of it all. I could see myself in it. Confident. Capable. Behind me, I heard laughter. A salesman, tall, smug, early 30s, leaned against a desk chatting with another guy in a slim navy suit. They were watching me. "Probably just browsing," I heard one murmur. "On a nurse's salary? Please." The other chuckled. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. They didn't even lower their voices. A third salesman, bald with mirrored sunglasses on his head, walked past me like I was a cardboard cutout. Not one person offered help, even as 3 other customers who came in after me were instantly greeted with warm handshakes and cappuccinos from the fancy machine by the waiting area. I made a loop around the lot outside, where the wind chilled my fingers and my heart. I found a Tesla Model Y, white, elegant, with a soft glow behind its tinted windows. Out of my league? Maybe. But I was tired of underestimating myself. Back inside, I finally walked up to the desk with determination. If no one was going to approach me, I was going to find someone myself. "Excuse me," I said, locking eyes with one of the salesmen who had laughed earlier. "Can someone show me the SUVs?" He looked up, irritated. "They're all out on the lot. You can browse freely." I meant, could someone walk me through the features? I'm looking to purchase today. He gave me a skeptical once-over. "Purchase today?" "Right." He didn't even try to hide his disbelief. "I'm serious," I said. "Okay. Well, what kind of budget are we working with?" he asked, arms crossed. "I'm flexible," I answered calmly. Another raised eyebrow. "You leasing? Financing? What's your credit score?" "Run it and find out," I said, pulling out my ID and a pre-approval letter. He hesitated, then took the paperwork reluctantly. "Name?" he asked. "Alyssa Grant." He typed it in. The receptionist swiveled around in her chair to peek at the screen. His jaw slackened. He glanced back at me, this time really looking. "Oh, okay. Let me just check something quickly." I crossed my arms. 30 seconds later, his entire demeanor flipped. "We have some excellent options available, Ms. Grant," he said, voice suddenly honeyed. "Can I get you a coffee while I prep the paperwork for a test drive?" I didn't move. I smiled just enough to be polite, but I let the silence speak. Now they were scrambling. But it was too late. I wasn't just here to buy a car. I was here to make a point. The smell of leather and desperation filled the showroom like cheap cologne. Suddenly, I was no longer the invisible woman in worn scrubs. I was Ms. Grant, the platinum tier credit holder who could sign off on any vehicle on the lot with a nod. Would you like an espresso or a cappuccino, Ms. Grant? The red blazer receptionist asked with a forced smile, rising from her desk like a malfunctioning robot. I'm fine, thank you, I replied, tone flat, still waiting to see the Lexus RX 350. Right away, said the salesman, Brian, as I now noticed from his name tag. Let me just grab the keys. He jogged across the floor, as though someone had set fire to his five-figure commission. The sudden change was almost comical, like watching a snake shed its skin and try to pretend it was a golden retriever. He even pulled out his phone and whispered something to a manager near the office glass wall. That man, too, glanced up and nodded, with an urgency that suggested someone important had arrived. Funny. Nothing had changed but their perception of me. Moments later, Brian returned with a chirp of the key fob and a rehearsed grin. Right this way, Ms. Grant. Would you like me to walk you through the safety features first, or let you take it for a spin? I'll take the walkthrough, I said, following him. I like to know exactly what I'm getting. Of course. This model has full surround sensors, adaptive cruise control, blind spot monitoring, and Apple CarPlay. It's also got the optional panoramic sunroof and the premium sound system. His voice became background noise as I ran my hand along the smooth curves of the vehicle. It was everything I'd imagined: power, elegance, and quiet confidence. Just like I'd become. Years of grueling nursing shifts, side hustles, and obsessive budgeting had finally given me a credit score north of 820 and a bank account balance that silenced rooms. But none of that showed in my shoes. Still, that wasn't my problem. It was theirs. After the demo, I slid behind the wheel. The leather hugged me like a throne. Brian settled into the passenger seat, overly cautious, like a man who didn't want to lose the sale he had almost laughed away 10 minutes earlier. Take your time, he said. We'll take care of everything once we're back. The test drive was perfect. The car glided through traffic like it owned the road. I barely had to touch the wheel. It adjusted for me. It reminded me of the life I'd built carefully, quietly, while everyone assumed I was just some tired woman in scrubs. When we returned, the manager was waiting. He looked like someone who thought cufflinks were a personality trait. Ms. Grant, I'm Aaron, he said, extending his hand with a salesman's practiced warmth. Let me say, it's an honor to have you here. We deeply value our customers, especially someone as well qualified as yourself. I took his hand but didn't smile. I'm sure you do, I said. Interesting, though, how nobody valued me before my credit report hit your screen. His grin faltered slightly. I apologize for any earlier confusion. We've had a busy morning and— Oh, I noticed, I interrupted. It was very clear who you made time for. Brian shifted awkwardly beside me. The receptionist glanced over nervously from her desk. Aaron cleared his throat. Would you be open to discussing a special offer? We can drop the interest rate to 1.5% and knock a couple thousand off MSRP. Now they were begging. I glanced at the car key in my hand, then at the pair of them. My silence made them fidget. I let it hang in the air like a judge's gavel. Actually, I said slowly, I think I'll hold off. Brian blinked. Hold off? But you said— I said I was looking to purchase, not necessarily from here. Aaron tried to recover. If there's something you weren't satisfied with, we'd love the chance to— Tell me, I said. Do you treat every customer in scrubs like a nuisance until you check their FICO score? Or was it just my lucky day? Neither of them answered. I continued. I may not walk in dressed like a hedge fund manager, but I can afford this car 10 times over. And I'm not interested in spending a dime where people like me are ignored until a number makes us visible. Their smiles were gone now. I placed the key gently on the counter. Thanks for your time, I said, then turned and walked out, back into the sunlight. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. I let my presence and their shame echo behind me like thunder. I didn't go straight home after I left the dealership. Instead, I pulled into the back lot of a nearby park, leaned back in my seat, and stared through the windshield at the gray clouds above. A part of me felt satisfied, vindicated. The other part, tired. Not from walking out, but from everything that had led me here. I wasn't born rich, far from it. Growing up, my mother cleaned houses, and my father disappeared before I knew what a stable home looked like. We counted pennies to keep the lights on. I wore shoes until they had holes, and pretended I liked ketchup sandwiches so my little brother could have the real food. I watched classmates with shiny lunchboxes and air-conditioned cars wave goodbye to parents who hugged them. I envied stability, and I promised myself that one day I'd have it. College wasn't handed to me. I worked full-time at a grocery store and cleaned offices at night just to afford community college. I didn't get spring breaks or birthday dinners. I got empty gas tanks and late-night bus rides. Eventually, I landed in nursing. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me something my past never had: control. Nursing taught me discipline, compassion, and resilience, but it also burned me to the bone. Night shifts, double shifts, watching people die, holding hands that would go cold moments later. It ages you, and it doesn't come with thank you cards. Still, I stayed. I saved. I lived like a minimalist monk, while my peers bought purses and brunch. I downloaded every budgeting app under the sun. I listened to podcasts about high-yield savings accounts while folding laundry. I read books about compound interest while eating ramen. I maxed out my Roth IRA while dodging student loan calls. Eventually, I paid off my debt. Then I started building. Side hustles, stock dividends, real estate. By the time I turned 34, I had more in my investment accounts than most people twice my age. I didn't flaunt it. I didn't buy designer anything. I still lived in a modest two-bedroom apartment with hand-me-down furniture. People assume wealth walks into a room wearing red-bottom heels. They never expect it to show up in faded scrubs and tired eyes. The truth is, there are hundreds of women like me, ghost buyers. People the world ignores until it's too late to treat them right. We shop quietly. We observe. We don't speak until the moment matters. That's why the dealership scene hit me so hard. It wasn't just about a car. It was a trigger. A reminder of how often the world tries to size you up in a glance. Like the landlord who almost didn't rent to me because I looked too young to be stable. Like the bank teller who asked if my direct deposit form was forged. Like the man at the open house who handed me his trash cup because he thought I worked there. It never ends. You can climb, and someone will still look at your shoes and assume you have nothing. But here's the thing about silent success. It doesn't need approval. You don't need to prove anything when your money is already working for you. When your name carries weight in rooms they haven't even entered. I pulled out my phone and opened the app for my preferred private dealership, the one that catered to professionals discreetly. I sent a message to Marcus, a contact I'd worked with before. "Hey Marcus, I'm ready for the RX 350. White, black interior, no sunroof. You know my specs. Alyssa." 10 seconds later, I got a reply. "Got you. I'll have it detailed and delivered by Tuesday. Want to finance or pay outright? Also, good choice. That trim level is clean, outright. Thanks. You got it. Always a pleasure. No paperwork, no judgment. Just respect and results. That's what trust buys you." I leaned back in my seat, letting out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The trees above rustled. A kid squealed in the distance as ducks waddled near a pond. For the first time that day, I felt peace. It's strange. You spend your life chasing validation, trying to prove your worth to a world obsessed with appearances. And then one day, you realize you don't need their approval, just their silence as you walk by. 2 weeks passed. The new car sat perfectly in my building's reserved parking space. Gleaming white paint, blacked out rims, spotless leather interior. I'd named her Grace, not because she was elegant, though she was, but because she represented how I moved through life, gracefully, even when people underestimated me. But this story wasn't just about walking out. It was about walking back in. I hadn't planned to return to the dealership, but something inside me, it wasn't revenge exactly, more like purpose, a need to make a point. Not for me. For every person who'd ever been ignored at a jewelry counter, talked down to at a bank, or followed in a store because they didn't look the part. So when I received a call from a nonprofit organization I support, an initiative that helps women rebuild their credit and gain financial independence, I had an idea. "Hi, Ms. Grant," said Tasha, the director. "We're starting a program to help our clients purchase reliable vehicles. It would be great if you could speak to the group about your experience." "I'd love to," I replied, "and I have an idea of where we can start." The following Monday, I returned to the dealership, but not alone. I brought 6 women with me. They were all from the program. Some single moms, some former addicts turned business students, one just out of a shelter. Their incomes varied. Their credit scores ranged from improving to excellent. But they all had one thing in common. They were done being overlooked. I walked in first. The same glass doors, the same showroom, the same manager, Aaron, now with a fresh haircut and a blue tie. His eyes landed on me, and I could see the moment he recognized me. His smile was hesitant. "Ms. Grant, welcome back." This time I smiled. "I'm here to buy a few cars, maybe 6, maybe more. But I won't be doing it alone." I gestured, and the women followed me in. Some wore jeans, others simple dresses. A few still had the cautious look of people expecting to be treated like they didn't belong. Aaron blinked, clearly trying to recalibrate. "Well, that's wonderful. Let me get the team." The same salesman, Brian, was summoned. He didn't look thrilled. I could almost hear the panic behind his eyes. "I assume you'll be handling everything personally?" I asked him. "Of course," he stammered. "We'll treat them with the utmost—" "You'll treat them with basic dignity," I cut in. "That's all we're asking." The next 2 hours were a flurry of VIN numbers, features, and finance offers. I sat back, sipping water, watching the women transform. Once the staff realized the money was real and the clients were backed by someone with a net worth that could finance the entire lot, everything shifted. Suddenly, the women were called ma'am. They were offered cappuccinos and escorted like celebrities. But this time, they knew the game, and they knew it was rigged. One woman, Stephanie, a former nurse trying to restart her life after divorce, looked at me as she finalized the paperwork on a used Honda CR-V. "I've never been treated this way before," she said, voice shaking, "like I actually matter." "You do," I told her. "Always did." By the end of the visit, 5 out of the 6 women had locked in purchases. The 6th decided to wait, and we respected that. It was her call, her money, her pace. Before we left, Aaron approached me in private. "I wanted to say thank you," he said, looking genuinely unsure whether he should be apologizing or congratulating me. "You brought us good business," I nodded. "You're welcome. But next time someone walks through your door in sneakers and a hoodie, don't wait for a credit report to find their worth." He nodded, quiet. As we walked out, I glanced at Brian. He looked like he'd aged a year and a day. One of the women, Tanya, whispered to me, "You know you scared the life out of them, right?" "I wasn't trying to scare them," I said, smiling. "I just reminded them who actually holds the power." She laughed. "You're like a credit score vigilante." "Maybe," I said, "but the real power isn't in the credit. It's in the silence before they check it." A week after our dealership visit, I received a handwritten letter. Yes, an actual letter, tucked into my apartment mailbox. The handwriting was shaky but full of intention. "Dear Ms. Grant, you probably don't remember me. I was sitting in the waiting area during your visit to Capital Crest Auto last week. I was there for an oil change, trying to ignore the noise and bustle of the sales floor, until I noticed something strange. 6 women walked in behind one woman. You, they looked nervous. You didn't. You walked like you owned the building. I watched the salesman scramble. I watched that one man sweat when you looked him in the eye. It was like watching a tide shift, like watching respect be forced into a room. Thank you for showing people like me that we don't have to beg to be seen. We just have to keep building in silence until our success is so loud they choke on it. With admiration, Yvonne. I read it 3 times. It reminded me that we never really know who's watching or who's learning how to walk with their head higher just by watching someone else refuse to bow. The ripple effects didn't stop there. Tasha from the nonprofit called to tell me that the dealership had contacted her directly. They wanted to sponsor a monthly event, offering free car inspections and basic maintenance training for women in her program. They even offered to hire 2 of the participants as part-time office assistants, with a path toward full-time jobs. "Did you orchestrate this?" she asked. "No," I said truthfully, "but I might have cracked the window open. It was up to them to step through it." Meanwhile, something else unexpected happened. Brian, the smug salesman who initially dismissed me, reached out. Through LinkedIn, of all places. "Hi, Alyssa. I've been thinking a lot about that day. I owe you an apology for how I treated you. I made assumptions I shouldn't have. I've started a mentorship program internally for new hires about unconscious bias in customer service. You were right. Respect shouldn't come after a credit check. If you ever want to share your story with the team, we'd be lucky to hear it." I didn't reply immediately. It took me a few days to figure out how I felt about that message. Was it genuine or strategic? Maybe both. But in the end, I chose grace. Because if people were willing to grow, I didn't want to be the one who shut that door. So I responded, "Thanks, Brian. Growth starts with accountability. I'd be happy to share my story, not to shame, but to teach. Let me know when." We scheduled a date for the following month. In the meantime, the women from the dealership day formed a group chat. They called it the Credit Queens. Every few days, someone would share an update, how they were tracking expenses, budgeting better, fixing their credit even more, planning their next goal. One posted a picture of herself test driving a minivan with her son in tow. Another shared a screenshot of her credit score going up by 19 points. "I didn't just buy a car," Tanya messaged. "I bought back a piece of my confidence." It was simple, honest, and powerful. The media picked up the story in a small way too. A local lifestyle blog interviewed Tasha and ran a feature titled, "From Overlooked to Empowered: How One Woman Changed the Game at a Car Dealership." I wasn't named, which I preferred. I didn't need a spotlight. What I needed was impact. People began reaching out to the nonprofit, asking how to donate or volunteer. One small act of walking back into that dealership turned into a cascade of opportunities for women who'd spent years being told, "Not yet," "not qualified," or worst of all, nothing. It made me think about how many opportunities die in the silence of low expectations. How many women shrink to fit the space society leaves for them? How many times a no could have been a yes if only someone had looked past the clothes, the accent, the worn shoes? I'd spent so much of my life trying to blend in, to go unnoticed. It turns out disruption was my true purpose, and it didn't have to be loud, it just had to be intentional. I stood once again in front of Capital Crest Auto. It was a bright Saturday morning, and I had accepted Brian's invitation to speak to their new hires. Not because I wanted to lecture anyone, but because I believed in moments that shifted culture, not just performance. Inside, a dozen employees, half of them new, a few veterans from the showroom floor, sat in a semicircle around a fold-out table in the dealership's training room. There were clipboards, muffins, name tags. Brian stood off to the side, hands behind his back, visibly nervous. "Thank you for coming in, Ms. Grant," he began. "You all may remember her from, well, the day our whole floor got humbled." A few chuckled. Brian nodded to me and stepped aside. I didn't use slides or handouts, just my story. I told them about walking into that building, wearing beat-up sneakers and confidence. I told them about the glances, the dismissals, the way the team had sized me up like I was unworthy of their time. And then I told them what came after. How I watched their expressions transform once a number on a screen told them I was someone. How that dealership, like many places, relied on surface-level cues to decide who mattered. I saw heads nodding. One young woman, barely 20, fresh into sales, bit her lip like she'd just realized how often she'd done the same. "You may think you're just selling cars," I said, "but to your customers, this place is often where they test their dignity." Silence. Then I added, "People don't always remember what you sold them, but they always remember how you made them feel." After the session, Brian walked me out. "You didn't have to be that gracious," he said, "but I'm glad you were." I paused. "You didn't have to grow from it, but I'm glad you did." He smiled. "You know, when I saw you that day, I honestly thought you couldn't afford a tire." "And I thought you couldn't afford humility," I said. We both laughed. Fair trade. Later that month, I was invited to an event hosted by the Women of the Credit Queens. Tanya had organized it at a community hall. They brought snacks, a DJ, and everyone wore t-shirts with the words, "Don't check my credit, check your bias." The room roared with laughter when I saw it. They handed me one too. We danced, shared wins, and talked about the futures we were building. Futures not just paved with better credit scores, but with better self-worth. Stephanie, the nurse-turned-leader, stood up to toast me. "Alyssa didn't just help us buy cars," she said. "She reminded us that we weren't broken, just temporarily unseen." I blinked back tears. Not because I felt proud, but because I realized the journey had never really been about me. It was about showing what quiet power looks like. The kind of power that doesn't need approval, doesn't beg for attention, doesn't throw money around to make a point. It just shows up, prepared, principled, and precise. The kind of power that walks into a dealership in sneakers and leaves with 6 people's respect riding shotgun. Months passed. Life moved on. I continued mentoring at the nonprofit. I visited the dealership once more, this time for a maintenance check. Aaron greeted me at the door like an old friend. Brian had been promoted to training manager and now ran bias training quarterly. But none of that mattered as much as the message that kept arriving in small, quiet ways. A DM from a teenage girl. "Saw your story online. I used to think people like me couldn't make it. I'm studying finance now." An email from a dealership across town. "We heard about your visit. Would you consider speaking to our staff?" A photo from Tanya of her new apartment lease. "Paid in full for the first time in 8 years. Thanks for believing." And a card slipped under my apartment door. No name, no return address, just 5 words in black ink. "You made me feel possible. They treated me like trash at the dealership until they ran my credit. But here's what they'll never know. My worth was never in the numbers. It was in the way I carried myself when they didn't believe I had any." If this story resonates with you, hit the like button and leave your story in the comments section. And of course, subscribe to my channel for more real, raw, and ridiculous stories.